was your thank God I looked at the contract moment. Story 1. I almost got scammed into a terrible deal, and I can't believe how close I was to losing thousands of dollars. It all started when I was looking for a new apartment. I found a place that seemed perfect. Spacious, good location, and even within my budget. The landlord seemed like a nice enough guy, and we quickly agreed on a price. The lease was ready to be signed, and everything looked good. But then, I decided to take a closer look at the contract. I wasn't going to just sign something without reading it carefully, no matter how trustworthy the landlord seemed. And thank God I did. Hidden within the legal jargon was a clause about mandatory upfront fees that totaled nearly $3,000. It was disguised as a security deposit and a cleaning fee, but it was not mentioned at any point during our conversations. The worst part? It wasn't refundable. I immediately confronted the landlord, and he tried to make excuses, saying it was standard practice and that I'd lose the apartment if I didn't pay. I walked away from the deal, and thankfully found a much better place that didn't come with any hidden fees. Moral of the story? Always read the fine print. No matter how perfect it seems at first, you can never trust someone else's word alone. Story 2. This happened to me when I was looking to get a new phone plan. I was with a major carrier for years and decided to check out the deals that were being advertised by another provider. They were offering what seemed like an amazing deal, unlimited everything for a really low price. The catch was, I had to sign a contract for 2 years. But, given how enticing the offer sounded, I was willing to commit to that. I didn't bother looking at the contract in full, which I now regret deep. It wasn't until a couple of months in when I realized I was being charged extra for every text I sent outside the network and every minor international call I made, even though those weren't disclosed to me at the time of signing. The kicker? There was a clause in the contract that prevented me from switching to a different plan for a whole year without paying a hefty fee. I called customer service to resolve the issue, but they insisted that everything was clearly explained in the contract. They were right, it was all there, buried in the fine print. By the time I figured it out, I was stuck in a deal that wasn't nearly as unlimited as I thought. The lesson I learned: always read the contract, and never assume that the salesperson is telling you everything you need to know. Story 3. I work as a freelancer and got an opportunity with a client that was offering what seemed like a great deal. They promised me a solid amount of work, which sounded perfect since I was trying to make a good income that year. They sent over the contract, and I was eager to get started, so I quickly skimmed through it. I didn't think twice about some of the legalese, and unfortunately, that's where I made my mistake. A few weeks into the gig, I noticed some payment delays. I reached out to the client, and they explained it was due to administrative reasons. But then, I dug into the contract once more, and this time I realized that I was required to invoice them within 48 hours of completing a project, or else my pay would be docked by 10%. It wasn't obvious at all, and the wording was tricky enough that I completely missed it the first time. I was furious when I realized the situation, but by then, I had already completed multiple projects. The contract was clear enough to keep me in a bad spot, and I couldn't do much about it. I learned my lesson the hard way. No matter how desperate or eager you are for a job, never sign anything without fully understanding it first. Story 4. This one is about a time when I almost bought a car that was way worse than I thought. I found a used car at a dealership, and it seemed like the deal of a lifetime. The price was super low, and the car looked like it was in good shape. The salesperson was friendly, and we spent a good amount of time going over the details. But then, I signed the contract without reading every word. A few weeks later, my new car started making strange noises. When I took it to a mechanic, I found out that the car had multiple issues that weren't disclosed. Things like an engine problem and a faulty transmission that could cost thousands of dollars to fix. When I went back to the dealership, I learned that the contract I signed stated sold as is, which meant I was stuck with it. It was a painful lesson, but I had to pay for the repairs and it drained my savings. Now, every time I buy something major, I take the time to go through the fine print and ask questions, no matter how friendly the salesperson is. Never trust the dealership's word alone. Story 5. A few years ago, I was looking to join a gym. I had just moved to a new city and thought it would be a good way to get into shape. There was a promotion going on, and the deal seemed too good to pass up. They had a special offer where you got a free month if you signed up for a 6-month contract, which sounded like an amazing way to get started. I did not read the contract carefully, and, as a result, I was locked into paying for those 6 months whether I used the gym or not. Worse still, the membership automatically renewed for another 6 months after the initial period without any notification. I didn't realize this until I was charged again. I tried to cancel, but the cancellation policy was buried deep in the fine print, and they required me to give 30 days notice, which I missed by just a few days. I was frustrated and learned the hard way that gym memberships are notorious for being tricky. Now, I'm always cautious about free trials or deals like that because if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Story 6. I was buying a house and I thought everything was moving along smoothly. The price was right, the house was perfect, and the closing date was set. The agent seemed knowledgeable and reassured me that everything was straightforward. I was just eager to move in and start my new life. The day before I was about to sign, I was still skimming through the contract. I didn't see anything that seemed off, but there was one clause near the end that caught my eye. It had something to do with additional fees related to property maintenance and special assessments. I looked it over again and realized it referred to a neighborhood association fee that could increase annually. Turns out, I missed the fact that the Homeowners Association, HOA, could impose mandatory fees for property maintenance, landscaping, and repairs on shared spaces. But the real kicker was the fine print that said the fees could go up without any limit. I wasn't expecting an additional financial burden, especially considering how high the initial house price was. When I went back to the agent to ask about this, they admitted the HOA fees were an important consideration, but they hadn't been made clear up front. They assured me it was a standard part of owning property in that area, and even though I didn't want to walk away from the deal, I ended up negotiating a lower price to account for the uncertainty of future fees. In the end, I got the house at a better price, but the experience taught me to never just trust the seller's word. Always dig deeper into what those contracts really mean, especially when it comes to fees you might not even be aware of at first. Story 7. This happened to me when I was switching to a new internet provider. After a lot of research, I found one that was offering incredible speeds at an affordable price. I was excited about the potential savings, especially since my current provider was charging me much more for subpar service. The salesperson was very convincing and made everything seem perfect. I was all set to sign up for a 2-year contract, which seemed fair given the price. What I didn't realize, though, was that the promotional price was only valid for the first 6 months. After that, my monthly bill would jump by almost 50%. To make matters worse, the contract also contained a clause that I hadn't noticed about installation charges and equipment fees. I thought the modem was included, but no. It turned out I was being charged a hefty fee every month just to rent it. The hidden cost came out to almost $300 over the course of the 2 years. By the time I noticed all of this, I had already signed and activated the service. I contacted customer service, but they told me that since I signed the contract, I was legally obligated to stick with the terms for the full 2 years. If I tried to cancel early, I would face a penalty. It took some serious negotiation, but I eventually managed to get the installation fee waived and locked in a better rate. Now, I always make sure to review every detail, even the smallest ones, before committing to anything. Story 8. I almost ruined my vacation because I didn't read the fine print on a car rental agreement. I was going on a road trip and needed a rental car. I booked everything online, where there was a great deal for an economy car at a reasonable price. They even promised no hidden fees and free cancellation if something came up. When I went to pick up the car, everything seemed fine and I was eager to get going. The agent quickly went over the contract, but I was in a hurry and didn't pay close attention to some of the additional charges. The agent did try to sell me an optional insurance package for $25 a day, but I declined, as I thought my regular car insurance would cover me. What I didn't know was that the rental company had a clause buried in the contract that required me to use their insurance if I declined the optional coverage. If I didn't, they would hold me liable for any damage that occurred, even if it wasn't my fault. After returning the car, I was slapped with an extra $1,000 charge for damage to the vehicle, which was ridiculous because there were no dents or scratches. I called them, and after a long back and forth, they finally admitted the clause in the contract. It wasn't fair, but at least I got the charge removed after a couple of weeks of arguing. From now on, I'll read every single section of any rental agreement, no matter how simple the deal seems. Story 9. This one happened to me with a gym membership. I've always tried to stay active, and I thought joining a gym would be a good way to keep myself accountable and work out more regularly. I found a local gym that had a great promotional offer, a low monthly rate with no sign-up fees. When I went in to sign up, the salesperson gave me a tour and explained all the benefits. They were really pushy, trying to get me to sign the contract that day, but I was in a rush, so I didn't take my time to read everything. The contract seemed simple enough, so I signed without hesitation. After using the gym for about a month, I realized I wasn't going as much as I thought I would, so I decided to cancel. That's when I found out about the hidden clause in the contract that required a 90-day notice before cancellation, and I had to pay an additional fee for canceling early. To make matters worse, I wasn't even aware that there was an automatic renewal clause that would keep my membership going indefinitely unless I explicitly canceled 6 months in advance. I was furious and tried to negotiate with them, but they wouldn't budge. I had to pay the cancellation fee and was still on the hook for another 2 months of payments. The whole experience left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I'll never make the mistake of trusting someone else to explain a contract to me again. Story 10. I had a close call with a furniture purchase that turned out to be a nightmare because I didn't carefully read the return policy in the contract. I had just moved into a new apartment and needed new furniture. I found a trendy store with great options and everything seemed perfect. They offered a special financing deal with 0% interest for 12 months, so it felt like the right time to make the big purchase. I was so excited to get the furniture delivered that I didn't think twice when I signed the contract. But when the pieces arrived, I noticed that they didn't look as good in my apartment as I had imagined. The colors were off and one of the chairs had a defect in the fabric. I immediately called the store, hoping for a simple return or exchange. To my shock, the contract had a return policy that said final sale on anything purchased through the financing plan, which I missed entirely. I was stuck with defective furniture that didn't fit my space, and I couldn't get a refund or even exchange it for something else. It was an expensive lesson, but I learned to always ask questions about return policies, warranties, and especially final sale items before agreeing to any contract. No matter how good the deal looks on the surface, it's essential to know all the details before signing anything. Story 11. I was renting a vacation home for a weekend getaway, and it was one of the best deals I had ever found. The listing promised a beautiful house, a hot tub, and a scenic view of the mountains, all for a very reasonable price. The reviews were good and the host seemed nice and responsive. I figured, how could anything go wrong? The contract I was sent was pretty straightforward, or so I thought. I quickly glanced through the terms, mostly looking for the check-in and check-out times, and signed it. I paid in full up front, feeling confident that I was going to have a relaxing weekend. When we arrived, the house was nice enough, but something felt off. The hot tub was locked, and there were no instructions on how to unlock it or any indication of why it was inaccessible. Then, when I started looking around the property, I noticed some additional issues. The heating system wasn't working properly, and the water pressure was low. Frustrated, I reached out to the host, but it turned out that the contract had a clause about maintenance limitations that I hadn't noticed. It stated that the hot tub, as well as other amenities, could be unavailable for maintenance or safety reasons, without refund or compensation. I was stuck with a house that didn't meet the advertised standards, and there wasn't much I could do about it. When I contacted Airbnb to resolve the issue, they told me that it was within the host's right to not provide the hot tub, and that I had agreed to this by signing the contract. The experience left me frustrated, but I did manage to get a small partial refund. I learned my lesson to read every single detail, especially about what's not included in the contract, even if the offer seems too good to pass up. Story 12. I once got a bad deal on a car lease that almost cost me big time. At the time, I was trying to save money by leasing a car instead of buying. I had seen an ad for a great lease offer, low monthly payments, great mileage, and an option to buy at the end of the lease. I thought this sounded like the perfect solution for my short-term needs, so I quickly signed up. When I reviewed the contract, everything seemed fine at first glance. However, the car dealer had sneakily included a clause about excessive wear and tear, which I didn't fully understand. The lease seemed to be a good deal, but I overlooked that the car was only allowed a limited number of miles. I thought the mileage limit was reasonable, but I didn't take into account how much I actually drove. About halfway through the lease, I realized that I was way over the mileage limit, and the dealer informed me that I would be charged an additional 25 cents per mile. Given the number of miles I had driven, this was going to add up to a hefty amount. I called the dealer, hoping to work something out, but the contract was clear. I was stuck with the extra charges. At the end of the lease, I ended up paying hundreds of dollars more than I expected. Now, whenever I consider leasing a car, I take extra care to review every detail, especially the hidden fees and penalties. Story 13. I almost lost a large sum of money due to a free trial that wasn't as free as it seemed. It started innocently enough. There was an online service offering a 30-day free trial for premium content. The website was slick and professional, and they offered something I was genuinely interested in, so I decided to give it a go. When I signed up, the terms were pretty vague, but I figured I was just giving my credit card details for verification. The trial was seamless, and I used the service regularly during the month. However, when the 30 days were up, I didn't receive any email reminding me that the trial was about to end, and the subscription would convert to a paid plan. Without realizing it, I was automatically charged the full annual fee, which was quite steep. I didn't find out until the next month when I noticed the charge on my credit card statement. I immediately contacted customer service, but they explained that according to the contract I had agreed to, The free trial automatically converted to a subscription unless I canceled before the end of the trial period. The fine print included a clause stating that no refunds would be provided once the subscription was converted, unless I contacted them within 5 days of the charge. Of course, by the time I noticed, it was too late. I had to swallow the cost, which felt like a massive ripoff. After that, I've learned to be extremely cautious with any free trial offers, ensuring I read every part of the contract and mark the dates when my trial period ends. Story 14. I had an unsettling experience when I tried to buy a laptop online. It was a Black Friday deal, and I found a laptop I had been eyeing for months at an incredible price. The website seemed trustworthy, and the laptop was advertised with all the features I wanted. Without hesitation, I clicked Buy Now. The deal seemed too good to be true, and of course, it was. When the laptop arrived, I noticed immediately that it wasn't the model I had ordered. Upon further inspection, the contract I had accepted included a section about substituting products of similar value in case of stock shortage. The similar value clause was what allowed them to send me a completely different model without informing me. I tried to get in touch with the company, but their customer service was unresponsive. I filed a complaint with the payment service, but they also pointed out that the terms were clear about substitution of items based on availability. What was supposed to be a simple and quick purchase turned into a frustrating ordeal. I ended up getting a refund after several weeks of back-and-forth emails. But I learned an important lesson. Always check the return and exchange policies before clicking Buy. And when it's a deal that looks too good to be true, take extra caution before making the commitment. Story 15. This story is about a fitness class I almost signed up for. A friend recommended it to me. It was an online program that promised amazing results in just a few weeks. I was intrigued, especially with the glowing reviews from other participants. The price was a bit higher than I expected for a digital course, but the results were so tempting that I didn't think twice about signing up. As soon as I enrolled, I was given access to the materials. However, I noticed the program required me to purchase expensive supplements and gear that weren't included in the price. I thought it was odd, but figured I could do without the extra products. But what really caught my attention was the fine print in the contract, buried deep within the terms and conditions. It stated that once enrolled, I was automatically enrolled in monthly auto-renewals for additional coaching sessions. The contract also had a non-refundable clause for anything beyond the initial course. If I didn't cancel within the first 10 days, I was locked into the additional monthly charges, which were hefty for something I didn't need. I immediately canceled my enrollment and managed to avoid the ongoing charges. That experience taught me to never sign up for anything without thoroughly reviewing all the terms, especially any clauses about automatic renewals or additional hidden costs. Always ask for a clear breakdown of what you're really signing up for. Story 16. I had a near disaster when I signed up for a vacation package deal, which seemed like a steal at first. A friend and I wanted to take a quick beach trip, and I found this promotion online that promised an all-inclusive 4-day vacation at a 5-star resort for only $500. It was such a great price for what seemed like a luxury experience, and the website looked professional enough that I didn't think twice about it. I entered my credit card details to secure the booking, and the confirmation came through right away. I thought I was getting a great deal, but when I got the email with the contract, I decided to take a closer look. I was so glad I did. Hidden in the fine print was a clause about additional fees for everything from airport transfers to mandatory resort activities, which I assumed were optional. These fees, which weren't disclosed up front, would add up to over $1,000 on top of the $500 I had already paid. Even worse, I realized the contract specified that once the package was booked, it was non-refundable. I called the company to clarify, and they assured me that the resort experience would be amazing, but they refused to budge on any of the extra charges. It wasn't until I pointed out that these fees were not made clear before I booked that they finally agreed to waive some of them, but I still ended up paying more than I initially thought. The experience taught me the importance of carefully reading every detail of any deal, especially when it's too good to be true. I was fortunate to get some fees waived, but I could have saved myself a lot of stress by paying closer attention to the contract before entering my payment details. Story 17. I once had a terrifying experience when I nearly signed a lease for an apartment that would have drained my savings. I was relocating for a new job and found what seemed like the perfect place, close to work, spacious, and affordable. The landlord seemed kind, and everything about the apartment felt just right. I was ready to sign the lease after only a few viewings. But before I signed anything, I decided to read through the contract one last time. I had learned my lesson from past experiences and knew how important it was to understand the terms fully. As I skimmed the lease agreement, something caught my eye. a section about mandatory insurance. It wasn't something I'd heard about before, and I was curious. It turned out the landlord required tenants to purchase a specific renter's insurance policy from a company they were affiliated with, which wasn't unusual. However, what was unusual was the exorbitant cost of the policy, which was about 3 times the going rate for the same coverage elsewhere. The contract also included language that meant I couldn't shop around for a better deal or cancel the insurance within the first year without facing steep penalties. I was shocked. I reached out to the landlord to ask about it, and they defended the requirement, saying it was standard practice for the building. But when I looked at other apartments in the area, none of them had such a restrictive insurance clause. In the end, I didn't sign the lease. I found a much better place that didn't come with these ridiculous insurance requirements. This experience taught me a hard lesson. Always read the entire contract, no matter how appealing the offer seems. There are often hidden clauses that can cost you far more than you anticipate.